Welcome and thank you for joining us. This webinar was put together by the Center for Environmental Health and the Bright Cities program of Healthy Babies, Bright Futures, and we'll be covering how to purchase healthier furniture and foodware without toxic chemicals. My name is Heidi Gerbrecht and I'm the Bright Cities program director, and I'm going to be moderating today. I'm going to introduce all three of our speakers and then we'll begin. Please note that we're going to send out poll questions. You'll see them pop up on your screen, and we'd love for you to answer them. And if you have questions for us, please use the Q&A box, and we'll do our best to answer them both during the presentations as we can and at the end if we have time. Our panelists today are Judy Levin, Sue Chang, and Jen Jackson. Judy Levin and Sue Chang are the Pollution Prevention Directors at the Center for Environmental Health. They assist large purchasers from government, education, healthcare, and private business on how to identify and choose environmentally preferable products. Judy leads CEH's work on getting toxic chemicals out of furniture and the built environment, and Sue leads CEH's work on getting toxic chemicals out of food and food packaging, including disposable foodware. Jen Jackson manages the Toxics Reduction and Healthy Ecosystems program at the San Francisco Department of the Environment. She and her team lead a variety of campaigns and programs and implement policies that reduce toxic pollution and improve environmental and public health, such as the San Francisco Green Business Certification Program, Integrated Pest Management Program, Healthy Nail Salon Recognition Program, a Pharmaceutical Producer Responsibility Program, an Environmentally Preferable Purchasing Program, and an extensive residential hazardous waste disposal program. So Judy Levin is now going to kick us off.
Thank you, Heidi, and welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for joining. I'll just say a brief words about the Center for Environmental Health. We're a national nonprofit organization, and we're dedicated to protecting the public from exposure to toxic chemicals. And one of the ways we found that really is effective in bringing about change, the polling question came up, is by partnering with large purchasers, including government, higher education, healthcare, and private corporations, and leveraging their buying power to incentivize the production of environmentally preferable products. So most Americans spend up to 90% of our time indoors, and indoor air quality has been found to impact the health, comfort, well-being, and productivity of people in the buildings. Studies by the EPA and others showed that the indoor environments can actually have higher levels of pollutants than levels found outside. And many of the chemicals we're going to talk about today in furniture affect our indoor air quality. There are 5 key chemicals of concern in furniture, and we have dubbed them the hazardous handful. And these 5 chemicals include flame retardants, polyvinyl chloride, also known as vinyl, PVC, volatile organic compounds, including formaldehyde, highly fluorinated compounds used as stain treatments, and antimicrobials. Flame retardants are typically added to products to slow or stop the spread of fire. But in the case of furniture, flame retardants were largely added because furniture manufacturers were required to meet an outdated and ineffective furniture flammability standard. And that was in effect until just 2016. Not only did that standard not reduce the severity or number of fires or reduce fire deaths, the flame retardants used were found to escape out of the products and find their way into our bodies, the water, air, pets, wildlife, and the environment. And some of the most commonly used flame retardants have been linked to cancer, and others are linked to decreased fertility, thyroid problems, decreased memory, hyperactivity, and decreased IQ in children. There's also occupational exposure, especially to firefighters who are exposed to the toxic combustion byproducts, and they've been found to have higher levels of flame retardant chemicals in their blood. And firefighters also have higher rates of 4 different types of cancer. So there's actually 2 different furniture flammability standards that apply to furniture. The most common, though, is Technical Bulletin 117-2013, the one on the left. And this applies to most furniture used in office buildings, residence, and really most other spaces. Although it's a California standard, it is really the only standard. It is the sort of de facto national standard. And note this new label. Flame retardants, there's a choice where manufacturers can check whether the materials contain or do not contain added flame retardant chemicals. And this is important because it gives you the option to see which products do or don't have them. It's important to know while the new standard does not require the use of flame retardants, nor do they provide added fire safety, these chemicals are actually not currently banned. So you need to be very careful and specify furniture that meets this standard without the use of flame retardants. The other standard is Technical Bulletin 133, the one on the right. And although, again, a California standard, it's been adopted in other states, and it really only applies to seating in public occupancies like hospitals, schools, dormitories, and correctional facilities. It's worth noting some of the differences between the two standards because it has large cost implications as well as an environmental health considerations. So TB133 is typically met with flame retardant chemicals, not only in the foam, but typically also in the fabric and or the barrier materials. And furniture that meets this standard is typically 25% or more expensive, offers fewer design and fabric choices than TB117-2013 furniture, and reportedly has a less comfortable sit and a shorter lifespan because the flame retardants actually make the foam harder and it degrades more quickly. Fire codes do vary by state, but often public occupancy buildings that might otherwise need to meet TB117-2013, 133, excuse me, if they have automatic fire sprinklers, then they don't need to meet that standard. We can help you if you're wondering about things in your state. You can check with the state fire marshal to determine what code the building you're working on must meet. Most cases, it's TB117-2013. So whenever possible, you want to purchase 117-2013 compliant products without flame retardants. So fluorinated compounds are used to provide often stain, oil, or water-resistant properties. And the chemistry to make these compounds uses a carbon-fluorine bond, which is one of the strongest bonds in chemistry. Some people have begun to refer to these chemicals as the forever chemicals because they're extraordinarily persistent and are expected to last in the environment for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Fluorinated chemicals like flame retardants can migrate out of the products and get into our dust. So ingestion of contaminated dust may be a common route of exposure. And this is especially true for children who, as mentioned earlier, have higher levels of dust due to their frequent or higher levels of flame retardants and the fluorinated compounds because of their frequent hand-to-mouth behaviors. There's also significant occupational exposure for workers who manufacture these products or perform services that use these chemicals. Some of the most well-studied fluorinated compounds are called long chains. You may have heard of PFOA or PFOS, they've been in the news, and they've been associated with adverse health effects like kidney and testicular cancer, thyroid disease, high cholesterol, and obesity. While these long chain compounds have largely been phased out, emerging studies on the replacement short chain chemicals suggest that they have many of the same problematic characteristics in terms of adverse human health effects and persistent in the environment. So our recommendation is that you specify products and fabrics that are free of these treatments. Instead, you can specify fabrics that are naturally more stain resistant. Designers have told us that synthetics or wool combined with other natural or synthetic fibers are just naturally more stain resistant. You can also choose fabrics that contain patterns that don't show the stains, or you can choose fabrics that are easily cleanable using non-toxic cleaners. So volatile organic compounds include a variety of chemicals, including formaldehyde, and they do affect our indoor air quality. These VOCs tend to evaporate from the products over time, and exposure occurs through inhalation, through the skin, or occupationally. In furniture, you can find formaldehyde in pressed wood products, glues, and adhesives, and even some textiles, especially in permanent pressed fabrics. Formaldehyde is a known human carcinogen, a respiratory toxicant, an asthma trigger, and it's been shown to decrease fertility and increase the risk of spontaneous miscarriage in humans. So to protect worker and your health, we recommend that you select products that meet the highest indoor air quality standards. So that would be California Department of Public Health standard, often called Section 1350, which is used nationally, or products that meet the Green Guard Gold or the SCS Indoor Advantage Gold eco-labels. And just on Green Guard Gold and SCS, you need to be sure to specify the gold level because the basic version of these eco-labels allows for higher levels of formaldehyde than the gold versions. And if your product contains composite wood, you should specify wood that complies with the California Title 17, the California Formaldehyde Emission Standards, which again is nationally adopted. All right, moving on. So antimicrobials are added to products, typically to reduce the microbe load on the product, such as in the fabric. Can also be used as a preservative in a product like in an adhesive and finishes. And there are lots of different types of antimicrobials. Some of you may have heard of triclosan or triclocarban, but there are many, many others. And they're added to a wide variety of products. But there's no evidence that shows that reducing the microbe load on a furniture product actually reduces the spread of infection. And in fact, many of these antimicrobials leach out of the products or degrade over time with cleaning and disinfection, so any supposed benefit may not last. And we're exposed through ingestion, inhalation, and through our skin. Antimicrobials can get into our water, and then they can be spread onto agricultural land through sewage slud, so they actually can end up in our food. Antimicrobials are associated with endocrine problems and reproductive changes, as well as possibly increased allergies in kids. And the medical community is concerned that this frequent adding of antimicrobials can contribute to the development of superbugs that are resistant to treatment. And this is a very large public health issue. So our recommendation is to avoid buying products with added chemical antimicrobials. There's an exemption if they're needed to preserve the product. And just to say, in 2015, Kaiser Permanente announced that they were banning the use of 15 antimicrobials from use in interior products, including furniture. And they made this decision due to concerns about the increasing exposure to toxic chemicals in everyday life, concerns regarding the generation of drug-resistant bacteria, and the lack of data that shows that these products actually reduce the spread of infection. So PVC, also known as vinyl, has a very problematic life cycle. Some of the concerns are that during production and manufacturing and at end of life when PVC is burned accidentally or intentionally during disposal, it can create dioxins, which is a known human carcinogen. In addition, PVC is naturally rigid, so to make PVC have the characteristics it needs, often they add additives, stabilizers, and plasticizers called phthalates. And some of these phthalates are known reproductive and developmental toxicants and are linked to respiratory problems, obesity, and insulin resistance. And flame retardants can be added to vinyl fabrics like the fake leather. And heavy metals such as lead may be added to the plastic. So many of these additives are not chemically bound in with the PVC, and they can migrate out of the products in which they're placed. You may find PVC in seating like the armrests. You might find it in the fabric, edge surfaces of table, and wiring. For almost all components, safer alternatives exist. So the recommendation is to specify fabric that doesn't contain PVC. Okay. So one of the best things you can do from a natural resources and waste reduction standpoint is to extend a product's life whenever possible. This is always better than buying new stuff. You can do this via redeploying existing furniture from one site to another, but really only if it's free of the hazardous handful. You really don't want to redeploy furniture that has toxic chemicals. Another good way to extend the life of the product is by refurbishing, reupholstering, or remanufacturing your existing products. And the San Francisco International Airport just decided to do this for one of their terminals rather than purchasing new furniture, both from a cost perspective as well as to help them with their zero waste goals. Just this year, BIFMA, which is the Business and Institutional Furniture Manufacturers Association, passed their new version of their eco-label, which is called Level. And we worked with another group, Healthcare Without Harm, to get a new criterion into the standard that would reward companies whose products do not contain the hazardous handful chemicals. And this is significant because this is the first time any eco-label has addressed this whole suite of chemicals. It should be noted, though, that this is not a required criterion, and products at any level can choose to meet it or not to meet it. So a higher level of BIFMA certification, it goes up 1, 2, 3, doesn't mean that the product will necessarily meet the restrictions on the key chemicals of concern, nor does it mean that a lower level will not. So our recommendation is that you specify products that meet 7.4.4, and that's a great way to get healthier products. I just want to show you this list of manufacturers who have products that will meet this restrictions. It's just a partial list. You'll see both large and small manufacturers, probably most of the companies with whom you now work. It's important to know, though, not all of their products are free of the hazardous handful. So you can refer to our shopping guide, which you'll see a resource at the end, or check with the manufacturer to ensure you're getting the right products without these chemicals of concern. I also want to mention the state of New York was very concerned about the human and environmental health concerns of toxic chemicals in furniture, and just last year became the first state to build these restrictions into their furniture specifications. They have an executive order and you can see their draft specifications there. And we worked very closely with the state of New York, and the furniture industry worked closely to confirm that there was an adequate supply of products that could meet their specifications. And it's not just the state of New York that's looking to restrict the use of the hazardous handful chemicals. The purchasers noticed on this screen are also committed to preferring products without these chemicals of concern. CEH has a purchaser pledge, which organizations can sign on to express their preference for healthier products. Signing the pledge is really a great way to get your organization to provide support for this work, and it also helps send a strong signal to manufacturers about the demand for healthier products. To date, CEH and our allies have gathered close to $1 billion in purchasing power for healthier furniture. And you'll see there's a space in the middle. We still have room to add new purchasers, so we can hope that we can add your logo in the future. So in summary, working on furniture is a great place to have a clear and early sustainability win. By selecting healthier furniture, you're creating healthier employees and healthier communities. The contract furniture industry has already been making great headway, and they're actually wanting purchasers to demand more of them in the area of sustainability so they can justify the expenditure of resources on this topic. So if we don't ask, they don't have the customer demand that they need to make these type of changes. Also, furniture is a great choice because healthier options are available from both large and small manufacturers. And what's really great is that in many cases, these chemicals are just not needed, and oftentimes furniture free of these added toxic chemicals costs less. I think I mentioned in one case it's like 25% less. So it's a great sustainability success story that aligns with most organizations' missions and values. And furniture with low VOC emissions, refurbished or redeployed furniture can also help you earn valuable lead points. And to make this even easier, CEH is available to help your organization go through the steps at no cost to you. So here are the ways that CEH can help. We can do webinars for your staff, if that would be helpful, so they can get on board. We have a sample letter for suppliers. We can test the market if needed. We can survey manufacturers to see what's out there. We can give you the technical specifications that you can use in your RFPs or RFIs or even in your contracts. If you're in the middle of a contract, we can also help you identify healthier products within those contracts. And we can help you, if you have a contract that you want to extend, we can help you use that extension period as an opportunity to get healthier products. And again, we can provide technical assistance. So here's some resources that are available. Kicking toxic chemicals out of office furniture is available on the CEH website, and it goes over all the issues in greater detail and provides links to all the resources. And then the orange publication is a guide for purchasing furniture free of the hazardous handful chemicals, and it lists the products that we currently know would meet these specifications. So thank you so much. This is my contact information, and I would welcome inquiries from anyone. Thank you so much. I'm going to share the screen now with someone else.
Thank you, Judy. That was very, very informative and lots of good information there. We don't have any open questions right now, so just remind people you can ask questions through the Q&A box. And I'm actually going to share the results from the poll. It looks like many of the participants have a general sustainable purchasing policy that may be able to be revised and updated. And there's a couple that don't have any sustainability policy yet. So it looks like that this may be some useful information for our participants. And the next person who's going to be presenting is Jen Jackson.
Thanks, Heidi. So we are the case study of how to deal with toxic chemicals in furniture and municipal purchasing. And our work on toxic chemicals in furniture really began in earnest after the California Flammability Standard changed in 2013, as Judy described. And we really did focus primarily on just flame retardants, and we were actually not even working on purchasing of our own furniture. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. We were working with the business retailers to try to get them to pledge to sell flame retardant-free furniture. But that all changed when CEH approached us with the pledge that Judy mentioned, and it really made us start to think about what we could do with our own purchasing decisions here in the city. So I'm going to close the poll on my screen. So let's see if this works. There we go. So I always like to ground myself in why are we working on a certain issue. And Judy really described well what all of the health concerns are with all of these different toxic chemicals. But I'll describe to you also some of the other local government reasons why we would work on this. And for us in San Francisco, we're not a huge city. We have about 850,000 residents, so maybe more or less than some of you on the phone. but we are actually the largest employer, second largest employer in the city. We have 29,000 employees. And we actually spend a lot of money on a lot of stuff. So we have a huge budget for materials and supplies, and we also have a large budget for capital improvement projects, which includes renovating fire stations and libraries and office buildings. So while these numbers don't reflect how much we spend on furniture, furniture is part of this. And so we actually do buy quite a bit of furniture, and over the years, that's added up to a lot. And we have to deal with furniture at the end of its useful life. And if it contains toxic chemicals, we really have to deal with the fact that we may be contaminating our landfill that we are actually legally responsible for. And the landfill could potentially affect groundwater and air resources. So to us, it's really important to think a lot about the whole life cycle of furniture that we're buying. And as we go forward into the future, that it's less toxic. We also, of course, as Judy mentioned, we're concerned about our own employees' health. Being the second largest employer, we have a lot of people who are sitting indoors all day long exposed to potentially toxic chemicals. And so if for nothing else, it's for ourselves and for our colleagues that we want to make sure that we're buying things that are going to be safer. So really digging into furniture, when Judy approached us about the pledge, like I said, we had really been focused primarily on flame retardants. And we realized, yes, of course, there are all of these other issues too. And in fact, we already had a prohibition on purchases of things made with PVC. And so the pledge really made us look at what we were already doing and also to incorporate additional things into what we might want to do. But we actually are really challenged in San Francisco. We have very decentralized purchasing, and we have no citywide contracts for some things like furniture. We have citywide contracts for office supplies and for industrial supplies and lighting, but we don't have anything for furniture. In addition, we all have similar challenges, I'm sure, as governments who do purchasing. We have to have multiple bidders. So if there are fancy new specifications, we have to make sure that there's going to be more than one bidder who can meet these new specifications. And then we also have to wait for contracts to end. So it's not like we can just jump in and create new specs and have great new furniture being bought right away. So we really had to wait for an opportunity to employ or to really have the rubber meet the road on this pledge that we signed. And the opportunity did knock. We work really closely with our purchasing department, and one of our purchasers said, hey, we're going to do an RFQ for ergonomic furniture. And while an RFQ isn't necessarily a purchase, it sets us up for working with certain vendors that can meet a spec. And so this is our opportunity to try this out and have all of these additional specifications in addition to the no PVC and no flame retardants, all of these other things added in that Judy had mentioned. And what was really exciting was that we had several suppliers come forward saying that they could meet these specs. And my hope is that the departments that are using the suppliers now are actually employing this. And then we had another opportunity come to us, which was a little bit closer to home. Our department director was sick and tired of having a hodgepodge of reused furniture in our conference room. And so she asked our purchaser in our department to go ahead and start working on new furniture purchase, new conference chairs. And we didn't even know about it here in our little toxics program, which is right here on the same floor. We only got wind of this purchase when we saw some chairs sitting at our purchaser's cube. And my colleague Jessie and Choi noticed them and said, wait, are we buying new conference chairs? And so it really goes to show that just even within one department, there can be the silo effect. So she got into action really quickly and started working with our purchaser to employ these new specifications and see if really indeed we could achieve those specs. And I will say it was a real challenge. There weren't lists available when we embarked on this to find furniture that would meet the spec. And so since we were only buying 40 chairs, it wasn't like we were doing a huge renovation where we could have an architect help us with getting the contract in place. So this meant really making the phone calls to the suppliers, finding out what kinds of chairs they could offer that would meet the spec. And then on top of that, we found out that one specifies the furniture, the chair itself, somewhat separately from the fabric. So you could have a chair, sort of the nuts and bolts part of the chair, meet a spec, but then buy the fabric and it doesn't. And the supplier is probably not going to tell you that. So we had to go back to the supplier and ask all the same questions again. So it was a rough and tumble process, but in the end, we were successful. We got these lovely green chairs that met all of our specifications, including things beyond environmental specs. We wanted to make sure that they were on rolling casters and that they stacked, and they were light and very comfortable, and they looked nice. So as all of you know, there's all sorts of other things that we have to take into consideration when we're buying things, and those were many of them. So this is a close-up of what the chair looks like. We're really proud of the process, since often as specification developers, we don't actually end up making the purchase, and we actually did in this case, and it worked. And there were lots of hours that went into this, and so we wanted to share the fruits of our labor. And we do that in several different ways, but one of them is by posting our specifications on our purchasing website, which is called sfapproved.org. Some of you may be familiar with it. It's meant for our purchasers within the city. We have some 700 to 800 delegated purchasers around the city, and this is supposed to be their resource, but we actually hear that we get more hits from outside the city on our website than inside. So I hope some of you will be able to use this. What you do is you plug in the search engine at the top, furniture, and you'll get this screen, and you'll see that we have a requirement to look for chairs and other things that we could reuse through our virtual warehouse. And then we have suggested specs for things that you're going to buy that are new. And the specifications, you will see that they're fairly similar to what Judy described, but this is a special list that we created. If you see down there at the arrow, we have a product list. And this product list kind of goes a step above. If you click on it, you'll get to this Google Sheet, which is a little bit scary, but it shows all of the products. It has links to the products. And then we also include the kinds of things you will actually need to specify specifically to that vendor. So for example, if you're buying a certain chair, what fabric will also comply with all of those specs? Or if a certain vendor does or doesn't provide things in chrome, you'll need to specify that it's not chrome. And you'll have to specify that it's FSC certified if that's something that's of interest to you. So again, we wanted to make this available to others. It will probably go stale within about a year, but if you can use it sooner rather than later, we highly encourage you to do so and to leverage all the hours we put into this. And I want to say thank you to my colleague, Jesse and Choi, who worked very, very, very hard on this. So Judy asked me to just mention one other thing that we have done recently. We in San Francisco passed legislation. So it's another tool in our toolbox here at the city to try to shift the market and also make it a little bit easier for our own city staff when they make purchases. So we passed an ordinance that bans the sale of flame retardants in furniture that's sold into San Francisco. So while this ordinance doesn't address all of the other hazardous harmful chemicals, at a minimum, at least it would be illegal for a vendor for our purchasers to buy it from a vendor that would sell them something that contains flame retardant chemicals. So this is hopefully going to help them along the way. And with that, I will hand it back over to Heidi.
Thanks, Jen. I'm going to share the poll results from this last one. What are your biggest challenges with sustainable procurement? And it looks like, to some degree, lack of support from leadership, but we got more folks saying lack of resources to track sustainability of products. So I think your presentation just now was really helpful. I'm going to go ahead, while it's my turn and we're switching screens, I'm going to go ahead and launch the third poll question, which is related to future actions. Actually, I think I may wait just a little bit to launch that one. In the meantime, again, feel free to ask questions in the Q&A box. And in just a second here, I think Sue Chang's going to start her presentation.
Yes. So can you all, let's see if you can see my screen.
Sue, I'm going to launch towards the end of your talk, if that's okay.
Okay, that's fine. So thank you, Heidi. So my name is Sue Chang, and I'm going to talk about CEH's work on disposable food service ware. Since Judy already gave you some background on CEH, I'll jump right into my specific area of focus, which is on eliminating endocrine disrupting, or also known as hormone disrupting chemicals in food and food packaging, and working with purchasers from all different sectors to move the market towards safer products. So this class of chemicals that are known as endocrine disrupting compounds, they mimic, block, or alter the activity of our body's natural hormones, even at very minute doses. Hormones direct almost every function of our bodies, from growth and development to processing everything from fear to sugar. They shape our fertility, our behavior, our physical and mental development, our intelligence, our metabolism, and our longevity. Exposure during critical development stages can lead to lifelong health impacts, and in some cases, it can affect future generations. So we're going to be focusing on the PFAS family of compounds that Judy already referred to, for food service ware, that's our focus. And Judy mentioned it's a concern for being used for stain treatments and furniture. Since she already covered some of the basics about PFAS, I will just reiterate here that the thousands of man-made chemicals in this class are extraordinarily persistent. Many of them bioaccumulate and are found all over the world. Jen Jackson will be talking a little bit later about why San Francisco is taking action and has taken action on these chemicals in this set of products. So I'm not going to go into detail here either, but I just want to say that they're found in a wide variety of products that we are likely to use or come in contact with every day. In addition to being used as stain treatments for carpets or water resistance for outdoor gear, I personally was really surprised to learn that these compounds are in things like waterproof makeup and dental floss. So our focus today, though, is on disposable dishes, including takeout containers such as clamshells. As far as how humans are exposed to PFAS, there are a few different ways, but the main pathway is through ingestion of food and drinking water. There's a limited but growing number of studies on the health effects of PFAS. Judy mentioned how companies have been moving away and have moved away from the long chain compounds, such as PFOS and PFOA, that have been more extensively studied, and towards the shorter chain compounds. But there are concerns, as she also mentioned, about these short chain compounds. And so a recent study found that concentrations of short chain fluorinated chemicals were higher than long chain chemicals in human kidney, lung, liver, and the brain. Additionally, emerging science is showing short chain compounds are more difficult to remove from water than their long chain counterparts. So CEH tested microwave popcorn bags from 19 different brands that we purchased in dollar stores in Texas and California, and we found these PFAS compounds in all of them. And there are studies that have shown that these chemicals actually migrate to the popcorn. So CEH began looking into the presence of these compounds in disposable foodware, I think in about a year and a half ago or so. And we started getting, asking for samples from various purchasers around the country of items that they're using. And we started to collect the data and turned it into a database and wrote up a report that was released earlier this year. So I wanted to talk about, what we found is they're primarily used for water and grease resistance. And unfortunately, these chemicals can end up in our food, in the landfills, and in compost. So we're recommending that folks really try to, overall minimize the use of disposable food service ware, which I'll get into the reasons, and use reusables whenever possible. And I'll also talk about sort of some of the issues around the terms like biodegradable or compostable, and some of the certifications that are involved with whether something's compostable or not. So CEH believes that single-use foodware is by definition a non-sustainable option, even if the materials are compostable or recyclable. And we're encouraging institutions to first ask whether a disposable product is necessary at all, and if there's other options to avoid their use. They use a significant amount of resources and create a tremendous amount of waste, and sometimes even use harmful chemicals or involve harmful chemicals, such as the fluorinated compounds. And then we also want to highlight concerns about polystyrene, and those are products that may be more commonly known as styrofoam. So for our findings and our results, we tested over 130 different products, and overall, the molded fiber products that we tested, which are the ones made out of sugarcane, bagasse, wheat straw, recycled paper fibers, all tested with high fluorine content. And it's unfortunate because, most sustainability-minded folks were starting to turn to these products because they're made from recycled fibers or agricultural waste. And so we've been talking to several manufacturers who are trying to find and be the first ones to come out with a better non-fluorinated alternative. And working together, you can use your purchasing power to really help move this market and really incentivize these companies to find better options. So as I mentioned earlier, we're strongly encouraging organizations to do what they can to serve food on reusables whenever possible. There's a great program called Rethink Disposable that was created by Clean Water Action that has great resources and tools, including a lot of detailed case studies on how companies have been able to decrease their use of disposables and increase reusables, and have resulted in cost savings as well as better outcomes for the environment and our health. So for those cases, though, where reusables are not possible, it is important to first consider where the disposable products will end up. And so you should check with your local jurisdiction to determine whether the foodware you're considering will be composted or recycled, because it really varies depending on where you are in the country. And even then, the compostable products really will vary by location and your actual facility and what's accepted and what's not. So we recommend, though, in terms of if you do have a compostable, commercial composting facility, to look for compostable products, and then if you don't, to consider recyclable, but then there's issues in terms of, because this is a product that's going to have food on it, there's concerns about, the level of food contamination and whether your recycling center can actually recycle the products. So you would need to check with your facility on what they actually do accept and whether it will really get it recycled. And then I just included a few other examples of additional environmental attributes that you could think about. So I'm not going to go into those right now, though. As far as the composting issue, and there's two main entities that certify or verify products as compostable. And we are really pleased to say that the Biodegradable Products Institute, which certifies, the food service ware products as compostable, is, I think, one of the leading groups in North America to do this. They've announced that starting in 2019, all new certified products must meet fluorine restrictions that they're putting in place to avoid basically the use of these PFAS compounds. And existing products will be required to meet the restrictions by the end of 2019. So by the end of 2019 and beginning of 2020, you should be able to look at their list of certified products and feel confident that they don't have fluorinated chemicals in them. Until then, we recommend, though, that you check our database to see which ones do or do not. Because this issue was not on their radar when the standards were developed, it currently does not restrict fluorine compounds from something that's certified as compostable. And this same issue applies to another group called Cedar Grove Composting Facility, which is located in Washington State. And they verify the compostability of a product by running it through their actual facility to see how well it composts. And there's a new sort of alliance that's forming now called the Compost Manufacturing Alliance, which I believe is comprised of 20 different composting facilities around the country. And they are currently working on developing a fluorine restriction policy, but do not yet have one in place. So that is an area where we could be encouraging and having purchasers encourage Cedar Grove and the Compost Manufacturing Alliance to get something in place as soon as they can. I did want to highlight, so even though we're focused on the fluorinated compounds in the disposable foodware, I did want to highlight concerns about polystyrene or styrofoam products. Styrene, which is a primary ingredient, is reasonably anticipated to be a human carcinogen, and there are studies showing that it can leach into food and drinks. It's very difficult to recycle. These products are made from petroleum. They end up in the landfills, in the waterways and ocean, and they break down into smaller pieces, which are then ingested by animals and get into our food chain. And because these are being used to serve food again, there's the issue of food contamination with the products. And in May 2017, the New York City had a study done, and they determined that this food service foam cannot be recycled in a manner that's economically feasible or environmentally effective. So we just recommend folks avoid polystyrene products whenever possible. And this includes the rigid plastic containers as well. So what can you do? There's several different things that you can do as purchasers, and I will go into that in just a second. So we recommend consulting our database of products. So we have it online, and it shows which ones tested positive for these fluorinated compounds and which ones did not. So you can really use this to find specific brands and types of products that don't have these chemicals in them. And it accompanies our foodware report, which I have a link to here. And if you don't see the product that you're interested in or that you're using in our database, you can actually send us samples of it, and we can test it for you at no cost. And we have instructions included in our report on how to do that. So this provides useful information for you in discussions with your suppliers, and you're helping to contribute to sort of the body of information and the list of preferred products that we have in our database. We also have a sample or a model letter that you could use to either send directly to your suppliers to let them know about your concern of this issue and desire for safer products, or you could use it in discussions with them and pull talking points from the letter. We really rely on purchasers like you to help create a race to the top and incentives for these companies to make safer products. And then there's also model specifications. Actually, New York just recently revised their foodware specifications to include restrictions on fluorinated compounds. I'm not going to go into detail because Jen will also be talking about what San Francisco is doing. But we have links here to these resources. And then, you know, put these choices into action through your purchasing decisions. Use reusables whenever possible, but all of the disposable solutions still have challenges. But if you're going to use them, please specify products that are certified compostable, that do not contain fluorinated additives if you have these facilities in your area, and avoid molded fiber and polystyrene. And then finally, you know, let the certification bodies and the standards organizations know that we don't want fluorinated compounds in these products, and they should not be certified as compostable or sustainable if they do have them. And if you do end up communicating with BPI, we, you know, encourage people to thank them for taking such prompt action to address this issue in their certification program. So I would like to end here because I would want to give time for Jen to really give you a sense of what San Francisco has been able to do, and I would like to turn it over to her now.
Thanks, Sue. This was really helpful. We do have an open question, but I think it might make sense to wait till the end for this one. So if Jen can go ahead and launch, then we'll get to the end and get some questions in.
Great, thanks very much. So in San Francisco, we learned about the issue of fluorinated chemicals about 3 years ago, really started to dig into it. And just to reiterate, again, this sort of the why, we learned that this fluorine-carbon bond is one of the strongest in chemistry. Actually, it is the strongest in chemistry, and it doesn't ever degrade. So no matter how long this chain may be, whether it's 6 carbons or 10 carbons, if it's with a fluorine element, then it won't ever degrade in the environment. And that was extremely concerning to us. Whether or not something is toxic, persistence is a really big problem because it will just accumulate in the environment and never go away. And then in addition, they're highly mobile. So these chemicals are found in the most remote places on Earth because they are actually surfactants, and they will move in water very easily. They also, unfortunately, move in air. And as Sue mentioned, and Judy as well, there are a lot of known impacts of these fluorinated chemicals, at least the 2 that have essentially been banned or phased out, PFOA and PFOS. We know they're associated with many different cancers, reproductive harms, and the short chain chemicals that are coming in their wake as replacement chemicals seem to display similar characteristics. The more concerning thing about the short chain chemicals is that they're actually more mobile in water, and you'll see why that's important when we talk about foodware. So when we started to think about, okay, fluorinated chemicals, what are they in? We found that they're in everything. And that's a very concerning issue. And so we actually are working on a number of different initiatives related to fluorinated chemicals. So with furnishings, I already mentioned that we now have specs that will eliminate PFCs or polyfluorinated compounds. And we also just released a regulation on carpet for our purchases of carpet in the city. And so that's something we would be happy to share with folks if you are going to embark on carpets. We spent a lot of time on that spec, and it includes many other things other than fluorinated chemicals. It has all sorts of environmental attributes as well as other things. But you know, when it comes to food packaging, we didn't really start working on this immediately because of these other issues that were kind of on our radar. But we did learn that it was in food serviceware, and we found out that there was going to be a new contract going into place for our hospitals. So I went into our hospitals. We have a very proactive climate action goal. We have a zero waste by 2020 goal, and that means that we're trying to divert as much as we can away from the black bin and move everything either into compost or recycling. And so with food service, if you're asking people to recycle or compost, you're actually going to get a much higher fidelity to the program if their food is actually on something that they can compost. They can throw the whole thing into the compost. So for many, many years, we've actually been encouraging people to put food serviceware that is paper-based into the compost bin. So when we found out that fluorinated chemicals are in these paper products and fiber-based products, we became really concerned. All of the material that's going into these green bins is going into our compost stream. We have an 85% diversion rate in San Francisco, and it's largely attributed to the fact that we do such a good job on diverting food and organic waste. And so this is a picture of our compost facility and what's going in. And you can see it's actually fairly clean. We have food and paper. We have done an amazing amount of public education around this. So we weren't in a position to start saying to people, hey, don't put your paper into your compost anymore. So instead, we needed to start thinking about what can we do for the whole city, including our purchasing, to try to eliminate toxic chemicals that would be going into the compost. And as I mentioned, we have this beautiful final product that's really great for the earth, but there's a lot of concern, especially with these short chain chemicals, that there could be plant uptake. The short chain chemicals, because they are more mobile in water, a plant is going to pick them up, and they actually move further into the plant, so into the food parts of the plant. The long chain chemicals tend to stay in the root systems because they are not as mobile, but the short chain chemicals have been shown to move further up. And so we certainly don't want to be contaminating our food stream either. So what levers do we have in the city? And we have many, but these are two that are really important to us. Of course, the power of the purse and what we do in city procurement, and then policy and legislation. So I'll talk about each of those. So for our own purchasing, we first tested our food service ware at our hospitals. We have 2 hospital cafeterias, SF General and Laguna Honda, and they have basically turned away completely from reusables, which is really disheartening. And so we're actually working with them now to try to use reusables again. But in the meantime, and also for employees of those hospitals who may take their food out, we wanted to make sure that what they were putting their food on was going to be safe for them and not transfer chemicals to their food, but also, of course, protect our compost. So we tested the food service ware, and many of the products that we tested contained fluorinated chemicals. We had transitioned to primarily a bagasse line of products, and so we immediately started working with the supplier to see what other things could be put in their place. And we researched a whole bunch of safer alternatives. Our supplier, basically, they just get a lot of different products from all sorts of companies, and it was kind of a big change for them. They didn't really understand the issue. So we actually started making a lot of phone calls directly to manufacturers that they were getting products from and asked them questions about fluorinated chemicals. What we heard over and over again was, oh, our products are FDA compliant. Sure they are, they have to be. And what that means really in the marketplace is that they are only free of PFOA and PFOS, which have essentially been phased out. That doesn't mean that the short chain chemicals are not in the products. And so we had to dig a lot further, and we had to ask the question, are any fluorinated chemicals in your products? And so with several manufacturers, we've actually been able to help them move away from using fluorinated chemicals. A few manufacturers were not even aware that that was being put into their products. A lot of these products are made in China, and they don't have a lot of control over their supply chain. They give them a specification of how water or stain resistant or oil resistant their product needs to be, and they leave it up to the manufacturing company to meet that spec. They don't give them necessarily a list of chemicals that they can't use. So this has been a really big change, especially for the manufacturers that tend to use these agricultural waste products like bagasse and sugarcane and wheat straw. And as of yet, there really isn't a solution for those products. They may end up lining them with PLA or trying to incorporate PLA into the slurry that they use. So really at this point, we have tried to move all of our purchases to paper-based as opposed to bagasse or sugarcane or wheat straw. So with that contract that I mentioned that was coming due, we actually were able to include a PFAS-free specification among many other environmental attributes. And the new contract went into place. So I'll be happy to say that we had 4 different bidders who bid on every single product that was in the request for bids. And so we had 4 successful bids and then 1 selected vendor. And so we feel like this is a huge success. It just was finalized recently, and so we'll be working with our hospital to make sure that the products that are actually supplied by the supplier are indeed PFAS-free. We'll probably do some additional testing to make sure, but the real bellwether for me will be when I walk in, is there a lot of bagasse and agricultural waste products, or are they mostly made of paper? So on the policy and legislation front, this is hot off the presses. We just introduced an ordinance in San Francisco that will be a citywide ordinance that will ban takeout foodware that contains fluorinated chemicals. So we tested the grounds at the purchasing level. Could we do it within the city purchasing realm? And since we could, and we found that there were enough alternatives out there, we decided that we could move forward with this in the whole city, because we wanted to make sure that restaurants and taquerias and delis and all the different kinds of products that folks might need, there were actually would be safer alternatives for them. And so this literally was introduced last Wednesday. It will go to committee next month, and we are hopeful that it will go into place and will help us a lot. And what it does is it actually says that you cannot have added fluorinated chemicals, but it also points to the BPI certification. So it's a way for purchasers and in all kinds of different institutions and restaurants and food service operators to be able to easily select products. The ordinance would go into effect on January 1, 2020, which is when BPI's certification would essentially be in effect for all the products that they have certified. So it's a really great win-win. We've been working with BPI for about 2 years and had urged them to relook at their certification. And it's been a tough road for them, and we give them a lot of credit for taking this on. It means that many products that they currently certify will probably not be able to be certified in the future. But sometimes we have to take the hard road, and they did, and we really appreciate that. So it will make it easier for all of us starting January 1, 2020 to make those sustainable purchases. So with that, I will end my part of the talk, and I think we're going to hand it off to Heidi.
Thank you. This has been really helpful. Very briefly, I just wanted to say a word about Healthy Babies, Bright Futures, and Bright Cities. Healthy Babies, Bright Futures focuses on neurotoxic chemicals specifically, some of which we've talked about today. And our Bright Cities program is basically set up to work with cities and local nonprofit partners to help cities address toxic chemicals in their local governments, including purchasing policies like we've talked about today. I'd love to hear from you if you think your community might be interested. My contact information is there on the screen. There's a little bit of information about the existing Bright Cities. I also want to, finally, I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll question. And we really want to have your feedback so that we can improve these webinars as we go and get more information from you. So I hope that you will participate. And I want to go ahead and start the questions. We've got one from Stephanie asking, what is the most helpful action that people who are not government purchasers can do, whether you're an advocate or an elected official? So I don't know if Sue or Judy or Jen would like to take a stab at that.
This is Judy. I mean, definitely if you're an elected official, you're going to have more opportunities than just an advocate. But, you know, definitely if people are familiar with legislators, you know, you can go to them and suggest that they sponsor a bill that would, you know, restrict the use of PFAS chemicals in foodware or furniture, flame retardants in furniture. In fact, there's currently a bill in California that would ban the sale of furniture, mattresses, and children's products with flame retardants. We'll see where that goes. And as an advocate, some of the things you could do is really contacting the companies and letting them know what you want. As Jen said, she was in contact with BPI. We were in contact with BPI. The more people that call these companies and let them know they don't want products with these chemicals, the more market pressure there is. And, you know, as individuals, we can, you know, use our purchasing power to buy safer products. And again, supporting legislation as advocates that is out there. And there's legislation in many states, and we're happy to connect you with states that are doing bills on PFAS or flame retardants. And somebody else may want to add some thoughts.
This is Jen. I would agree with everything Judy said, and there are really great models now for a lot of these ordinances and legislation. So folks can copy ours, or there was a legislation in Washington state. So there's a growing body of models and templates for passing local laws. And then I would say also the purchasing decisions that you make at home are really important. And the website that I mentioned, sfapproved.org, while it's meant for purchasers, we have residents use it all the time. It's a public website, and we encourage folks to go on there. Sometimes we don't have specifications, but we have suggested guidelines on various different products. We have hundreds of different product categories with information, so you can look there too.
Yeah, and this is Sue. I just wanted to add too that I agree with everything both Judy and Jen said, and you know, even just the things that you do at home or on your personal time, sharing this information among your colleagues or friends can also make a huge difference, because you never know if somebody works at another big company and they can share that information with their purchasing department. So I think the more people that know about these issues, the more that we can get done.
Thank you. I actually wanted to ask, as the city government person here, I'd wanted to ask Jen some more information about, you know, how this sort of filters out amongst city staff folks, and if you do trainings, and how they sort of perceive the implementation of these kinds of policies. How do you get folks on board and excited for something that may at first seem like it's difficult to do?
Right. So we generally create green teams when we're doing a new contract. So for example, when we're working on food service where we work directly with the hospitals that would be impacted, and we talked with them about the why. Hospitals tend to want to make sure that they're taking care of people, and so the why was very easy to get across to them. They really didn't want to be using problematic chemicals in their food service ware. So uptake in terms of the why was really easy, but I think the key piece is that we are building relationships, and we don't just leave them when we passed a policy or had a contract go into place. The contract went into place, and they're already getting some complaints from employees about the new products that are being used in the cafeteria. And so they've asked us to come back and do some employee training. And so that's a really key bit, that we aren't just going to leave them behind once we've done our work. Our work continues, and actually in many cases, whether it's purchasing or if we pass legislation, the work really begins after we've in the implementation phase. So for anybody who is like we are creating specifications for other departments, it's really important to hold their hands after that policy has gone into place. So yeah, the green team piece is really important, getting people on board with that green team, having a champion in a department. If you have decentralized purchasing like we do, the departments make their own purchasing choices. Often they can get around policies and guidelines that we've put in place. If they're either not aware of it, that it is in place, they can just purchase something generally directly from a vendor. So really it's important for us to do education. We have monthly and yearly trainings with the purchasers around the city. And then when we have new things come up, we do presentations and invite affected departments to those presentations as well.
That's really helpful. It sounds like one of the main takeaways is sort of the ongoing nature of this work. And it sounds like continuous training and outreach, but also I'm curious about sort of reviewing the science and the specs, and it seems like this is something that could change, you know, on a regularly ongoing basis. So is that something also that's, I know that CEH does that. I know that you do that in San Francisco, but it sounds like that's an important part of this as well.
It definitely is. So the problem with foodware really came about, fluorinated chemicals in foodware really came about because of our ban of styrofoam. So we banned styrofoam, I don't know, about 8-10 years ago. And the replacement was these agricultural-based products. And that's great. And everybody thought they were wonderful. And so we had to, we really at the time probably should have done some more due diligence on checking to make sure that what was coming in the wake of removing styrofoam was actually safer. So it's really incumbent upon us to make sure that whatever we're banning or telling people not to use, that we're finding better alternatives for them. And that's that's the part of the puzzle that is probably the most challenging, because it really does require calling vendors, calling manufacturers, going up the supply chain, asking all the questions. So the spreadsheets that I showed you for the furniture and the spreadsheet that CEH has put together for the products that are currently safer, we all need to keep up with those, and it's a huge challenge. And we're always looking for new technology to make that easier. And hopefully there will be more and more opportunities for making databases more easily updated. But nonetheless, it will always take somebody looking at what the newest science is and making sure that we are keeping up with it.
Thank you. That's helpful. We have a question from Rachel that I think Sue can take. Do you have any recommendations specific to schools? There's often resistance to installing dishwashers and purchasing reusable foodware as opposed to compostable ware. What research do you recommend I can bring to my school district about this?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have been in touch with a few different schools and school districts about this question, particularly those that are using sort of those multi-compartment disposable food trays. You know, I think when we did a quick scan of what's on the market, a lot of those trays were either styrofoam or molded fiber that were sort of on the lower end of the cost spectrum. And you know, there are actually creative ways that schools have been looking at incorporating reusable options, even though they don't have dishwashing equipment and they don't necessarily have a ton of space to store or dry and wash the reusables. There is a great case study about, and I know this is a high school, so it may be different for, say, kids at the elementary school level. There's a school called Bishop O'Dowd on the Rethink Disposable website that has a case study of how they've been able to move to reusable sort of like food baskets. And actually there's a school district that has a bunch of elementary schools in it that is trying to figure out and relook at their menu about ways that they could try to incorporate either reusable baskets or other things that don't necessarily require dishwashing equipment and not necessarily a ton of extra labor either. So I would recommend going to that site or following up with us, and we can share information with you about that.
Thank you. I just sent a note to remind everyone, if you haven't participated in that last poll question, if you would, that would be very helpful. I don't think we have any more questions, but we do have time for one more if there is any, if anyone wants to submit one. Otherwise, I do want to say thank you so much to all of the panelists and also to our attendees. This has been really informative and helpful for me, and I'm hoping for each of you as well. We're hoping to do more of these in the future, so stay tuned. All of us have our information there on the screen. If you need to reach out to any of us, I know we'd be happy to hear from you. And we will make the slides available after the webinar. So thank you so much for spending part of your day with us today, and we hope you have a wonderful afternoon.